안녕하세요. Hello, my name is Joe Long, and for my senior project, I decided to learn Korean cooking. I wanted to learn Korean cooking because of my interest in the Korean culture and my desire to improve my cooking skills and learn the cuisine of the country. Today, I'll be showing you how to make a traditional Korean beef dish called bulgogi. Bul means fire, and gogi means meat. So the accepted etymology is that at one point it was cooked over fire. But today we have cooktops and stoves, so I'm just going to show you how to saute in a pan, and then to wrap it up quite literally, we're gonna serve it with lettuce and rice and some hot pepper paste sauce. So first, let's see a rough outline of what we're going to be doing. We want a pound of whole ribeye, so tell your butcher at the local grocery store to cut it paper thin, or shaved. We like to use ribeye because it is the most flavorful of all steak cuts, and that's what we really want to try to drive home with a dish as rich in flavor as bulgogi. We'll need 1 large or 2 small yellow onions, 1 Korean pear, and a few cloves of garlic, peeled. We'll then need soy sauce, sesame oil, rice wine for cooking, not to be confused with rice wine vinegar, sugar, and black pepper. To finish it off, we'll also need a carrot or 2 and a couple bunches of green onions. 시작하자요. Let's start. The first thing I want to do is get my rice cooking. So I'm going to scoop about 2 cups of rice and then rinse it off, then fill it with the proper amount of water as marked on the bowl, and then put it in the rice cooker and start it. So the first thing you want to do is peel your yellow onion, 양파. And then we're going to start dicing it. So we want to basically cut it into small, almost cube-like pieces, but they don't need to be too small because we're going to let the blender do most of the work. A little bit of the skin here, we'll get rid of that. And we actually want to save a little bit of the onion, and we're going to cut it into thin slices like this, and we're going to save them for later. And we're going to put them in this prep bowl. And so then we'll finish dicing this second onion. And so now all of this goes into the blender. So I'm going to scoop these into the blender and try not to drop too much. So next we need our Asian pear, pe, and it looks like this. You can get it at your local Asian market. So we need to peel that, just like we peeled the onion, and then we're going to dice it as well. So I'm going to make sure that I get all this skin off and get the cores out as well. So that should be all the cores. And I'm going to dice it. So this is going to go into the blender as well, and we're just going to once again try to scoop it without dropping too much. All right, and so then we have garlic, mano, and we'll also need to peel that. And then we're going to cut out the roots at the very top of them, just to make sure those don't get in. And then we're going to chop these up into smaller pieces as well, because they won't necessarily blend as well as the other things, because they'll hide because they're a little bit smaller. So I'll try to chop these up a little bit smaller. And then this will go into the blender as well. So now that they're all in the blender, we're gonna put it onto the puree setting because we want it to be about the consistency of applesauce. So, all right, so there's been a little bit of a mistake with the blender putting together, but here we have it mostly pureed. So we're gonna put it into the pan. So now that we have the first part of our sauce done, we need to cut some vegetables, the green onion, the pa, and the carrot, tangun, and they're gonna go with the reserve onions from earlier, and then they're going to be added to the sauce a little bit later. So we wanna cut the green onion into about 1 to 2 inch pieces. And we'll throw these in with the onion from earlier. Now, I've already cut off the roots of these green onions and then rinsed them. And I wanted to make sure that when I rinsed them, I got in between where the branches separate to make sure that there's no sand stuck in between them. So now we have the carrot, tangun, and we also cut off the grass part of this and then peeled it earlier, and then after we peeled it, we rinsed it, just like the green onion. And so now we want to julienne it. And julienne is a long, thin cut. So we're going to try to get it as best we can into strands. And then we're going to add this, the green onion, and some of the other yellow onion to the sauce after we put in the meat, and they'll fry just as separate vegetables to add some heartiness to the meal. Maybe cut these in half once so they're not quite as long. And then we'll add these to this overflowing bowl here. So now for the wet ingredients, we're gonna mix them together and then add them to our puree, or I guess it's sort of a puree from earlier. And so the first is going to be sesame oil, chamgirum, and we want about 1/4 cup of this. Next, we have soy sauce, kanjang, and about 1/2 cup of this, maybe more, maybe less. All really depends on your taste. Korean cooking is all about cooking to your taste because the ingredient quantities are pretty flexible. Now, I want rice wine for cooking. Remember, it's not rice wine vinegar, and this is makgeolli. And we also want 1/4 cup of this. Now, we need 1 to 2 teaspoons of black pepper, huchukaru, And then a 1/4 cup of sugar, sultan. Now we need to whisk this all together. So now that we have the rest of our wet ingredients mixed together, we're going to add it to our blender disaster from earlier. And just mix it up. Try to get it to a nice consistent brown color. Now it actually smells pretty good since we've got the onions being balanced out. And now it's time to get our beef, bulgogi, and then we're going to add it to our sauce. So this will get pretty messy, and that's why I've gotten gloves here, and we're going to use the gloves to stir the meat around and break it up and fold it together and all that good stuff. And we don't have to worry about creating a mess on our hands, and we can go straight to frying it. So you can see how our beef is kind of shredded and it's sort of pulling apart already. This is exactly what we want. And that's because when we start frying it, it's going to break apart and get into strands like this that are nice to eat without having to cut anything, because we'll be eating with chopsticks. So we're going to kind of pull it apart as we put it into the sauce. And then once we start working with our hands, it'll pull apart a little bit more. And the sauce itself will help lubricate and get that stuff separated. So now we're just going to fold it around and get everything covered with the sauce. We don't want to mangle the beef, but don't be too gentle with it because it is just essentially marinating right now while we're stirring it around, absorbing all the flavors of the pear and the onion and the soy sauce. We can add our vegetables from earlier now too, the green onion and the carrots, and some of the other yellow onion. Really mix it around and get it all nice and covered with the sauce, since we have a lot of sauce to work with. And it looks like we'll be ready to take it to the cooktop now. So now that everything is mixed together, we can take it over to our stove and start sauteing the bulgogi. But before we start, we want to make sure that our pan is clean and our burner is hot. So we need to make sure that our pan is clean, so we're going to go and rinse it off, but instead of drying it, we're going to shake it dry. And we're going to turn the burner on to medium heat, which on this stove is about 5. So my teacher, Sensei Neem, taught me that if you leave the burner on and the water in the pan, by the time the water evaporates, the pan is going to be hot enough to start sauteing. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to give you a lesson on using chopsticks, since you'll be using chopsticks to not only cook but eat the bulgogi. So I have here a pair of disposable chopsticks, and once you open the paper, you have to break them apart. So depending on where you are in Asia, they're going to hold the chopstick either higher or lower. In Korea, they usually hold them up high near the top. The idea when you're holding chopsticks is that the bottom one never moves while the top one moves freely to grab things. So with this bottom one, we're going to hold it in this saddle between your thumb and your index finger and brace it against your ring finger near this top knuckle and hold it firm. Then with this top one, we're going to brace it between the thumb and this fat part of your index finger and then hold it up higher between your index finger and your middle finger. That way you can move it freely without the bottom one ever having to do anything. At first, it's going to be difficult to grab things, but practice makes perfect. And remember that you can angle it sideways, so when you're picking things up, it can almost act like a shovel and there's stuff stacked on top of it. So, it looks like our burner is now ready because all the water has evaporated. And we're going to start shoveling the bulgogi into the pan. So we're just going to start picking up as much as we can and putting it into the pan. We want to make sure that we cover the bottom of the pan with as much meat as we can so that everything cooks evenly and so that we can cook it all within a reasonable amount of time because there is quite a lot. So we'll just keep adding to it. And the trick to cooking this meat is that we want to make sure that we get rid of all the brown and that's it. We don't want any pink, but we don't want to leave it in too long because it is pretty marbly and it'll get tough really fast if we leave it to brown too much. So we're going to be very careful not to let it overcook. So we're just going to keep turning the beef and getting all the pink in contact with the pan as much as possible. That way it'll all go away, but no part is overcooking. The vegetables can just sit there. Don't need to worry about them too much. So it looks like this is almost done. So it's okay to take it off a little bit early because it will continue to cook when it's off and into the platter. So we're going to just dump it out. And start over. This batch looks like it's about done as well. So I'm going to also pour it onto the platter, and we'll just keep doing that until we've finished cooking all the meat. So now we'll add more. So now we're all finished sauteing the bulgogi. 다 했어요. So before you dive into it, because I know you're going to be hungry after frying all of it, we want to take and have a proper presentation with it. So we're going to take a lettuce leaf, 상추, and we're going to put some rice from earlier into the lettuce leaf, then bulgogi, and then some hot pepper paste, and then eat it like a wrap. So now I'm going to take my lettuce, and we're going to scoop some rice out of the rice cooker. And when you first open the rice cooker after it's been cooking rice, you want to stir it around a little bit to fold it and make it fluffier, and a fork is usually best for that. So I'm just going to scoop and sort of fold the rice. So now I'm going to take my chopsticks and scoop some rice into the lettuce leaf. That's probably good. So now I'm going to add some bulgogi to my lettuce. And then I want to add some gochujang, red pepper paste. And this is basically Korea's favorite condiment because they use it on pretty much everything. but it is very spicy, so you want to make sure that you don't put too much on. And then just put it all in one scoop and enjoy. Very delicious. 너무 맛있어요. So, 감사합니다. Thank you all very much for watching. And I'm really excited to eat this. So without further ado, I'm gonna say goodbye and start eating. 안녕히 계세요.